One of the more confusing experiences after narcissistic abuse is realizing that self-doubt can continue even when part of you already knows the truth. You may recognize a pattern clearly. You may notice something feels wrong. You may even understand, intellectually, that your reaction makes sense. And still, another part of you hesitates. You reconsider. You soften your own perception. You wonder if you are being unfair, reactive, dramatic, or too certain. For many survivors, this becomes exhausting, not because they cannot think clearly, but because certainty itself no longer feels fully accessible. Many survivors are not struggling with an inability to perceive reality. They are struggling with the loss of permission to fully stand inside what they already perceive. That is a different problem. Because after enough perceptual override, certainty itself can start feeling costly. This pattern usually develops gradually. At first, second-guessing can feel responsible. You stay open-minded, you reconsider your reactions, you try to account for context, stress, misunderstanding, or nuance. None of that is inherently unhealthy. The shift happens when your own perception begins carrying less authority than the possibility that you may be wrong. Over time, your system can become more organized around self-correction than self-trust. You notice something, then immediately evaluate whether you are allowed to notice it. You reach clarity, then instinctively dilute it before fully letting yourself stand inside it. When someone has spent enough time being taught that their perception creates instability, hesitation can start feeling safer than certainty. That hesitation often survives long after the relationship ends. Not because the survivor lacks intelligence, and not because they are incapable of discernment, but because internal authority was repeatedly interrupted before it could fully settle. This is part of why many survivors describe feeling disconnected from their own decisiveness afterward. Not necessarily incapable of seeing things clearly, but unable to remain steady inside what they see. You may notice yourself looking outward before trusting your own conclusion, checking for agreement, needing reassurance, waiting for confirmation before allowing your own perception to fully count. Chronic second-guessing is often less about confusion and more about interrupted self-permission. That distinction matters. Because many survivors assume that certainty should feel immediate if something is true. But for a system that adapted around perceptual instability, clarity and internal permission do not always arrive at the same speed. One part of you may recognize something immediately. Another part may still be bracing for contradiction. Sometimes survivors know the truth long before they feel safe enough to fully trust themselves inside it. That can create a very specific kind of internal tension, especially when perception itself is accurate, but the nervous system still associates certainty with risk. As this becomes clearer, the second-guessing itself can start looking different, not as proof that you are incapable of discernment, and not as evidence that your perception is unreliable, but as the residue of a system that learned to interrupt itself before fully settling into clarity. That does not disappear instantly, and it does not require forcing certainty before your system is ready to hold it steadily. If you're noticing how quickly you move away from your own clarity, even when part of you already knows what feels true, I created a 30-day stabilization space as something structured you can step into while you begin relating to your own clarity more steadily, without needing to force certainty before you're ready. The link is in the description below whenever it feels appropriate to explore it. And if you prefer to stay here and continue orienting at your own pace, that is completely valid. Second-guessing yourself does not automatically mean your perception is wrong. Sometimes it means your system learned that certainty was safer to soften than to fully inhabit. We'll pause here.